these police officers with kind of a silly smile on his face, leading Mr. Carboni to believe that he might have a mental problem, and he keeps walking north. The evidence, in my judgment, is that there are no people at that intersection. There's a police car at the intersection. The officer at that intersection, who's there right at the intersection, says he didn't see any people there. And so the suggestion that he ought to shoot this guy in the back without a warning, I think that flies right in the face of the Ninth Circuit law.
Okay. Now, the other side disputes much of that.
Fair enough.
In a trial, it may come out. They may win.
They may. We're asking for a trial. We're asking for our day in court.
So at the time, when the officer pulled trigger, shot him in the back, the circumstances right around that hole, which is your best case that says a reasonable officer who might have been knowledgeable of the law in this area would have known, any reasonable officer would have known that when he pulled the trigger in that circumstance, he would be violating, using deadly force, he would be violating the victim's constitutional rights?
My best case is Estate of Aguirre versus County of Riverside at 29 F 4th 624.
Okay.
Okay.
And you didn't cite that in your briefs, did you?
We did not cite that case because I didn't find it until this week. I apologize for that. But the court in the Aguirre case cited George versus Morris, which made it clear 6 years before this incident, clear to a reasonable officer that a police officer may not use deadly force against a non-threatening individual, even if the individual is armed and even if the situation is volatile. That was cited. That's the law in the Ninth Circuit, and it should be very clear, plainly
So
clear.
I think those cases that George is about, when someone has a gun, you can't shoot them unless they're lifting it. So I thought you had a pretty good argument about that, but I'm troubled by the switch that seems to be happening today to saying he didn't have a gun at all.
I'm sorry if I've misstepped here, because that's not my main argument. That's not my principal argument. My argument is that he was not threatening anybody at the time. There were no people to be worried about at the intersection. That's maybe disputed by the police, but that's what this photograph shows. And when Carboni says, the reason I shot was I saw some kind of movement from the arm and maybe the butt of a gun, Pedrera, who testified that he had Mr. Calonge in his sights for a solid minute, and he did not see any movement or any gun. That's a conflict in the evidence. The justification Carboni makes is this movement that only he saw, and that Pedrera specifically said, I was staring at this guy because I had my rifle on him, no movement. So I mean, I just think it's clearly a case that needs to be tried, and I think the law is clear. It should be clear to any reasonable person. There's a reasonable officer, and there you have it. And I see the light's gone yellow. I don't know if I'm in trouble or not.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. If it please the court, Thomas Gray for defendants appellees. I'll get right to the question at hand. Yes, many people saw Mr. Calonge with a gun. The 911 callers saw him with a gun.
They didn't see him. The callers.
The 911 callers
Yes. Okay.
all said they saw a gun. Officer Esenio, very early on, when Mr. Calonge is walking southbound on Jackson and passes in front of the officers and the officers' cars with lights going, says, and I'm reading from ER 0265, the appendix to the DA's report, and I'll preview and hopefully avoid any objections. Appellants cited the DA's report at least 10 times in their opening papers.
Like Judge Friedland suggested, I never understood their argument to be that he didn't have a gun.
Well, I'm confused what their argument was about the gun.
But you have to look at what they presented to the district court, because that's what we're reviewing. We're reviewing the district court's ruling. And he may be counsel may have misstated or mischaracterized or whatever, but we're looking at what was presented to the district court and what's presented to us. We can only assume when there may be some factual disputes about some of the key events that took place. You may have a different version, he may have a different version, but for our purposes, we have to look at the version he presented. He's the non-moving party in this instance. They're the non-moving party. So we look at the evidence in the light most favorable to them, and if there's a factual dispute there, and they prevail here, that factual dispute will be resolved at trial. But for our purposes, for purposes of qualified immunity, we're looking at the facts in the light most favorable to him. So he had a gun, right? But his main argument is that he was not threatening to anybody. He wasn't threatening the officers, and he wasn't a threat to anybody else nearby, standing, a passerby, right?
If I may, they're using a very narrow definition of threatening in terms of pointing the gun at somebody. And I think they say that over and over in their papers, that they're pointing a gun. Right. But Mr. Calonge's his behavior that afternoon was very threatening. Overall, he has the gun. He's waving the gun around in a parking lot. That prompts
the officers know anything about waving a gun around in a parking lot. I didn't see any indication that at the time of the shooting, that at least the officer who did the shooting knew anything about waving a gun in a parking lot.
I believe there is evidence in the record that suggests the officers were aware of the 911 calls.
Yes, but the 911 call just said there's a guy with a gun, right? It didn't say anything about he's threatening people with it or waving it at people.
I don't recall exactly about those words. You're right. But
If you have that record site, I'd like to see it as well.
right, I don't have that record site, but I do have the record site to the DA's report, which both sides have used in their arguments, where Officer Isinio did say he saw the gun. He had the gun, and that's at 2:32 p.m. and 19 seconds.
We don't. I think we're assuming that he had a gun.
Okay, so he's got the gun, and he's ignoring the commands, and there's arguments.
But he's ignoring conflicting commands.
Well, not necessarily.
But in the light most favorable. So just give us your best argument in the light most favorable to the plaintiff.
Right, but they're grouping all the commands together. And it's not a situation where multiple people are constantly issuing different commands. If we look at Appendix B at ER 0265, Officer Isinio initially says, hands up, don't reach for it. Then he says that again at a few seconds later, don't reach for the gun, because he sees the gun in the waistband. He had just put the gun in the waistband.
I mean, watching the video, it really sounds like there are a lot of commands happening at once.
Yes, but they're not all inconsistent. And then Officer Isinio says to him, get on the ground. And then a few seconds later, he says, get on the ground.
Someone says, drop the gun. Someone says, don't touch the gun. How are those not inconsistent?
Oh, that's later on when Mr. Calonge appears to be reaching. So at 2:33, Officer Isinio says, he's reaching, watch him, he's reaching. So then Officer Carboni says, drop it. And then Isinio says, drop the gun. Don't reach for it. So he's got his back to them. The gun's in the waistband. Officer Isinio thinks he's reaching for the gun. Does he have the gun yet or not? So there's some confusion there because of Mr. Calonge's actions of putting his hand toward the gun.
In the light most favorable to the plaintiffs, though, he wasn't reaching for the gun.
Okay, he wasn't reaching for the gun. He also wasn't complying with any of the commands for that minute and 20 seconds.
But so why don't Estate of Lopez and George tell us that if he wasn't reaching for the gun, he wasn't an immediate threat?
I think a case that's cited in the Casella case, which we rely on, is the I always forget the name. 1 second, sorry. The Blandford versus Sacramento City case, cited by Casella. It's a case from this court, 408 F. 3rd 1110 from the Ninth Circuit, 2005. That's a very insightful case for this issue here. Officers are called to the scene. A man has a 2.5-foot sword. He's acting erratically.